It's as tight as a nest of Chinese boxes. I mean, you can just keep opening these lids and finding different things inside, but each one of those boxes is perfectly handcrafted. That film is very, very well put together.
Although the movie is set in the future, like any movie, it's a product of its time. And this is really a product of the Reagan era.
I say good business is where you find it.
I like violence, you know. I like violence in movies. I wanted to show Satan killing Jesus.
Cinematic robots have a long and illustrious history. Some of the earliest films, in fact, either had mechanical people or artificial humans.
There is positively no human agency employed whatsoever in controlling it.
Something what people are dreaming of, nah? Being a person, mankind being a machine. Nah?
Musicians of the world unite. Automation is on the way.
I think there are two films that were important to me when I shot Robocop, which was The Day the Earth Stood Still, and the other one was Fritz Lang's movie Metropolis. And you can see a lot of parallels, especially with the robot that Lang invented.
Even as early as 1922, Lang sort of foretold and forecast the Western culture's ambivalence about technology. Maria is this beautiful, shining, durable construct that at the same time is manipulative and violent and sexual and all the darker elements of what started to creep into technology and man's awareness of technology.
Ours is a male version of Fritz Lang. We have a little bit more sophisticated outlook, a bit more high-tech, but it's still very close.
Robocop. Who is he? What is he? Where does he come from?
Robocop was an idea that I came up with when I was an executive at Universal Pictures, and I couldn't stand my job, so I went off and wrote a screenplay. Michael Miner came through the door and said, "Oh, you want to write a script about a robot? I like robots." And there we were. The first idea for Robocop was a robot. And then it very quickly it became a man who became a robot.
Ed and I were thinking of two ideas independently. He had an idea called Robocop, which was about a robot police officer. We were writing Robocop when Terminator was being finished, and we waited until the script was finished before we saw the film. I guess they could both be called postmodern robot films in the sense that the humor is very dark. I think that the Cameron film is much more a horror film than Robocop, which to me is social satire with some very real emotions in it.
They brought it to Jonathan Kaplan, and Jonathan Kaplan didn't want to do it, so he suggested that they bring it to me. Orion had produced The Terminator, and I'm sure the success of that film led them to take a chance.
We went over to Orion, and they just said, "Okay, let's go." And it was like, whoa, we sold a script, we're writing it.
We basically went right through the list of every halfway decent American director, and every one of them turned it down. And I have a feeling most of them probably never got past the title page that said Robocop. They could just envision it on their resume, you know, thinking, no, I don't want to go there. Everybody had reservations about the title because the title is just basically silly. And no matter who you told the title to, you could just see it, the expression on their face like, God, why are they involved with such a piece of junk, you know? So we often thought about trying to come up with a better title, but it stuck.
In fact, I remember Orion saying, "We can never sell it with that title. It's stupid. It sounds like a kid's movie." But in the end, a title that tells you what the movie is really quite good.
Action! Go!
I'd always been this huge fan of Paul Verhoeven. Barbara Boyle had just finished doing Flesh and Blood with him for Orion. She said, well, let me send it to Paul Verhoeven. Paul was having trouble in Holland. He just was not getting along with the people in the film business there, I guess.
First movies that I did, included Soldier of Orange, were always financed by government that was right wing. Now when the government changed to the left wing, I started to have problems. It started already with spatters, because they thought it was decadent and perverted.
Paul's the director. He can direct actors. He beautiful camera work. I mean, Kichi Tipple, Soldier of Maren, Spedders, Turkish Delight, I mean, these are good pictures. I can't imagine in a million years that Paul Verhoeven would want to do this picture. And sure enough, he said no.
When I got finally that script of Robocop and I read it, I thought it was extremely silly and stupid. I threw it on the floor and saying, I'm not going to shoot this kind of rubbish. My wife picked up that script Robocop and read it. And she said, you know, yeah, this is perhaps not, it's not Shakespeare, but it is a script with more layers than you think.
Martine read it and said, there's decapitations and people getting their arms ripped off. You'll like it. And indeed, he said, well, I have never seen the hero get his hand blown off.
And he sent us a telegram saying that he would do the picture. And no one was more shocked than I.
In the movies like Turkish Delight or Soldier of Orange, The Forced Man and Spetters, which are the most well-known in the United States, you are really talking about people and no, not special effects. So it's strange because I had never done anything like that. And it was not that I was craving to do it. It was not that I thought, my God, I remember these movies out of my youth and I want to do them myself. I think in general I would say that I was not a big fan of science fiction.
Doesn't matter, we're going to blank his memory anyway.
I think it's really amazing if you look at Paul's work. There's nothing that indicates anything like this before, and he effortlessly pulls that off.
Well, he signed the release forms.
But prior to playing Dick Jones, Ronny Cox, for the most part, had played the exact opposite type of character. Wholesome family man or country guitar strumming, ordinary guys. Just very, very nice characters.
I'm confident that we can go to prototype within 90 days.
Rob Bottin, who created the suit, works by sculpting everything in clay three-dimensionally. He started doing a number of full-size sculptures of Robocop, very little 2D art. We would go over, we being Ed Neumeier, the writer, and Paul Verhoeven and myself would go over to Rob's shop and watch this thing progress. I mean, for a while he looked like Judge Dredd. For a while he looked like, a real superhero with a huge chest and shoulders. But we always went back to sleek, like a product of Detroit in a way.
If Braun, the German company, had made a knight in shining armor, that's what he would look like.
Ed had found these Japanese comic books where they make this kind of bulky robots with big shoulders, but then in steel. Rob's costume in the beginning was much more like a kind of a bit modernistic version of Fritz Lang. But we thought, we are going to do something better. This Japanese comic books will help us to make it really revolutionary instead of being influenced by the past, and we fucked it up completely. That was a big explosion, artistic explosion between our group nearly and Rob Bottin, who ultimately said, I cannot work this way. Then I think we stepped backwards finally, but when we had lost already months by fooling around, by the time we stepped backwards, he had lost 40–50% of what was good, so it was terrible. Rob Bottin was extremely frustrated and he couldn't even talk to us anymore, certainly not to me, who he saw as the main guilty person.
Rob figured out that the way to do this would be to create an undersuit that would be flexible, and then to create a harness that fit over the undersuit where you could hang solid pieces of the fiberglass exoskeleton.
Sometimes we were really rubbing it with oil or wax or something that it really got shiny, and I always put a lot of different lights from different directions so that the appearance of the Robocop was like a figure of reflections. You could always see it outlined in light. It has a power. I always got the camera very low, on very low angles, and the lower the camera is, the more the camera looks up to him, the bigger Robocop appears.
Well, we shot the movie in Dallas. We did go scout Detroit with Paul, although it did fairly well in the sort of seedy urban department. It didn't have any kind of futuristic skyline or any kind of modern look to it at all.
Robocop was shot in Dallas from August through October of 1986, which is like the most humid and the hottest, steamiest, nastiest time to be in that part of the world. The temperature on the days that they were shooting there was about 120 to 130 degrees inside. Peter was literally losing pounds of weight every day out of water dehydration. He was constantly having to be hydrated.
Peter had a mime coach by the name of Moni Yakim. And he wanted to work with Moni on practicing basic robotic moves and to create a character through movement. Peter and Moni rehearsed for many, many weeks before the start of filming. Rob Bottin was supposed to deliver the suit about 2 or 3 weeks before principal photography, but as these things go, the suit arrived on the day we needed it to be shot.
Rob was very much delayed because of our problems, isn't it, that we had created partially ourselves, and that's why the costume came so late to the set.
And it took Peter 11 hours to get into the suit the first time because everything needed to be fitted and adjusted and changed and shaved. So by the time Peter walked out of the trailer door 11 hours later, he was in a complete state because everything he had rehearsed with Moni didn't work in this suit.
We had a terrible time and we had to stop production because we got into a conflict, but the conflict was basically because he said I can't do it and I don't know how to walk, and basically and we said and the production said, well, I have to shoot, you know, no time. And he said, well, but I didn't get time to practice. And we said, well, that's a pity. We have to shoot anyhow. It was so devastating. It was so frustrating, and we were so insensitive that we didn't understand that that could not be done. It was only later that I realized that we had done something completely inappropriate, and that Peter Weller had all the right of the world to protest. And so ultimately Mike Medavoy said, okay, let's stop a couple of days and you work with Peter. So we started then to work with the system, with the costume, and we had the video camera, we showed it to him, and slowly he got the confidence and the ability to do it so that it looked good.
Paul Verhoeven and Rob Bottin weren't even speaking to each other during the entire course of the film. In fact, Rob stopped even coming down there at all and turned the whole thing over to what we call the Robo-Team.
Action will be everybody shooting, yes?
Hey!
And background!
We took over 10, 12 empty buildings and dressed them and then had them rigged to explode. We were all over the city blowing things up. We're on the news every night. Something was exploding or there was something going on.
Good in! Cut.
Now fill it up on number 7.
Well, the explosion at the gas station was big enough that it did manage to set the building on fire.
Ronnie's idea to really have that turn on it instead of a straight-ahead confrontation, which was interesting.
I think it's one of the most powerful scenes, and I think it sets his character up in a really good way, and I think it sets my character up in a really good way.
I think the character of Bob Morton is definitely pissed, but definitely scared. Because when Ronnie says you just fucked with the wrong guy, it's, you know, he's seen some bodies buried before. But I think his overriding greed and confidence actually makes him believe that he's going to get away with it because he's smarter. So, I mean, the guy really got to do everything. He started out in the beginning of the movie as really quite an underdog, took an opportunity, rose to power, success. His life changed. All of a sudden he had money and girls, nice clothes, and then it all went south on him.
I'm cashing you out.
My agents had called me up and said, Ronnie, would you like to go in and do this film? And I got to tell you, my agent said, I don't think it's a very good film, but it said it's a chance for you to play a villain. I'd spent my whole career playing Mr. Nice Guy, and had always played just the sensitive fellow next door. Since I had been in a number of films where I've always played sort of sympathetic guys, it gave us the element of surprise, which is always my favorite, because so many times with villains you sort of know where they're coming from, and with me playing him, you sort of wanted to try to like him at first, and then there was nothing to like. Oddly enough, with Dick Jones, I looked for every good thing about him. I always looked for the opposites. When I played all of those sympathetic nice guys, I always looked for the rough edges on those guys. And with Dick Jones, I just looked at this, and I really sort of looked at the world through his prism. I bought into what he was saying, and then once I did that, I tried to play him as simply and as straightforwardly as possible.
Obviously, Ed 209 was far superior to Robocop. I mean, everybody knows that. I mean, of course, it had a couple of design flaws, but we can work that out.
I'm sure it's only a glitch, a temporary setback.
The only guy I'm worried about here is the old man. Guys like you, no worries.
Staggering around in the water, overacting up a storm, I had to make sure I didn't pull my hose, because the hose had the blood in it and it ran under the water, up my pants legs, up my wrist. So when I grabbed it right here, all the blood is pumping out of my wrist actually and onto my neck.
The moment among villains I thought worked best was when Bob Morton was killed. He's there with the two call girls and the cocaine, and Clarence shows up with the DVD of Dick Jones giving him the speech about how he has to die. So you have three villains in one place.
Paul is Dutch, and Joost Vacano, the cinematographer, is German. And
I don't believe that Paul knew during that evening that bitches was a pejorative term for females.
We were getting ready to do the scene, and so we were kind of blocking it out, and Paul says, Kurt says, bitches leave, then the bitches leave, and bitches, then you leave when he says that. And then he says, no, wait, bitches, don't leave, wait. Jost, what do you think? Should bitches leave when he says bitches leave, or should they wait for him to make a motion? Jost goes, the bitches should leave. Yeah, bitches. Bitches, you leave. Miguel and I are just sitting there cracking up. And the bitches, they didn't seem to have a problem with it at all. They were like, okay, fine, sure.
Very good, thank you, bitches. Very good, that's a wrap on the bitches. Thank you very much, bitches.
I couldn't resist sticking my tongue in the ring and pulling it out with my teeth.
This is the second time that Kurtwood had killed me in a movie. And, it's been 20 years, and I really think it's time for me to kill him.
Flashpoint Miguel is in, and I kill him in that movie, too. So he has sworn vengeance on me.
Gotta try to make that happen. This movie absolutely changed my life.
It's done well for me. I mean, it opened doors at that time.
Didn't make me much money for a long time.
I don't think any of us knew really how well it would turn out. I think everyone was surprised.
It made me sort of a character actor to be seen at auditions. And, when you're looking for people, then, I became one of those people. In this business, acting, especially character acting, you need to have a good role in a successful film.
It was fun playing that guy.
God bless that robot movie.
My name is Robert Morton. I'm the developer of the Robocop program for OCP, and you're going to be meeting Robo in a minute. He is the most technologically advanced law enforcement product to date. I'd like you to meet him now. Now, you're only going to be able to ask him a couple of questions, okay? Not take up too much time, and I'll be right here. Robo, come on in. These men are going to talk to you for a minute, okay?
Robo, do you know why you were created?
I stopped crime.
I see. Robo, I understand you have three prime directives. Can you tell me what they are?
Serve the public trust, uphold the law, protect the innocent.
Is there anything you'd like to add to this?
I am the future of law enforcement.
That says it all, doesn't it? Thank you, Robo. It was a good job.
Thank you.
What did I tell you? Be looking for him.
This picture takes place in old Detroit in the future. It's the story of a cop named Murphy who in the course of his duties gets killed. And he is rebuilt as a cyborg, part man, part machine, and he is now programmed as the future of law enforcement.
I was reading a lot of comic books for a studio. They came to me one day and said, Ed, read these comic books. We want to know what you think of comic books. And I had never really read comic books, particularly of this sort, which were of these sort of modern, neurotic superhero. Iron Man, Spider-Man, Machine Man, all these things that a guy named Stan Lee over at Marvel created. It was the superhero who had sort of trouble being a superhero. Even though he had all these powers, there was like something going on inside. So he was sort of like a superhero with a headache.
Robocop has been looking for me and my boys because we're the ones that shot him up at the beginning. And as the film has gone along, he's discovered who we are, so he's come looking for us. And he happens to find us here. And then is in the process of arresting me, and since I won't give up and go along peacefully, he starts throwing me through various windows of offices in the warehouse here while he's reading me my rights.
Okay, next shot. Thank you very much. Thank you. Just a little bit blood, that's natural, I suppose, or is it just fake blood? Huh?
That's what we're in the process of doing, and that's what all this business comes from. So when they take me to the police station later, you know, I look something like this.
Okay, ready? Action! I think what my influence in the style has much more to do with the way I shoot it, the editing, and the way I work with the actors, which is perhaps a little bit different from a normal action picture, because I spent, I think, much more time with the actors than you would normally do for an action picture.
Well, I play Bob Morton, who is a sort of up-and-coming executive for this company, OCP. The company itself is kind of scary. It's like, we are Beatrice, you know? We own the police, we own the hospital. It's great. And he's like the most ruthless, ambitious agent who ever sat behind a desk at William Morris. That's how I equate it, you know? The writer calls him a yuppie with teeth. So
no matter how sophisticated criminal technology gets, no matter how sophisticated our society gets, no matter how futuristic it becomes, there's still going to be the beat cop.
Hey, have you thrown it all over? Line up, make me an offer. Go!
The robot had a gun that fired a three-shot burst. So when the bad guys got shot, you not only had one bullet hole, but you had three. So you had a large hole, a large cavity, and a lot of blood. And these are extra large blood bags, but in a lot of the sequences, that's how much blood we use with 3 or 4 of the bullet hits to get the blood gushing and spurting off the chest cavity and the body cavities of a lot of the shots.
Ready? Action!
Right here.
Well, I could hardly feel the impact. The brass of your last round hit me right on the chest. Yeah. I figured if you wanted to take a shot at me after I did this to you, I couldn't blame you.
Actually, the rigging was really superb. I hardly felt the impact of this.
Now, when those things go off, what do you feel?
Feels like, that's it, we're doing a super job.
Yeah.
One of my earliest recollections of robots is sitting in front of a television set when I was 4 years old watching a local Philadelphia TV show called Mr. Rivets, and it was a man in a cardboard box painted silver. Now hopefully we've done a little better than that. We have one of the all-star teams of special effects. We have Phil Tippett, Academy Award winner, doing all the stop-motion animation on the robot Ed 209.
Stop-motion animation is a frame-by-frame process where we move the stop-motion model, the arms, legs, the feet, the tail, the eyes, the back, very infinitesimal amounts, and then we take one frame of film and repeat that process again. Take one frame of film, repeat the process, take one frame of film.
We have Pete Coran, who did all the roto effects in the Star Wars pictures. He's doing all our RoboVision shots, all the POVs of the robots. We have Rocco Joffrey, is probably the finest young matte artist in the United States, doing all our matte paintings. But I think Rob Bottin here has really designed and created one of the most interesting, most spectacular robots I've ever seen on film. Well, today we're shooting the scene where Murphy gets killed by the gang. First they blow off his hand, and then they blow off his arm, then they blow off his head. It's, Rob Bottin has created all these prosthetics, and they're quite startling. We were going to use Peter Weller to blow his head off, but we decided we may need some looping later on, so Rob Bottin has created a wonderful prosthetic, a puppet of Peter Weller, which looks exactly like him.
Go!
and it sits up and it looks around and it gets frightened and screams, and the whole back of the head blows off. Quite traumatic.
Yeah, let's get out of here.
The future of law enforcement. Robocop.
Action!
If I had enough money to buy the materials, that's as much as I needed.
And I thought I was doing a cartoon until I saw that first really rough cut. I was like, oh my God, it's great.
I would get what the studio would consider to be the oddball project, something that didn't really fit into the traditional kind of generic frame. And Robocop was certainly one of those pictures.
I'm the production designer, and my job was to sort of give a look to the picture and keep, what I always feel is to keep a cohesive look to the picture. There was a constant in design, very brutal, cold architecture. You'll see there's a constant line of concrete wherever we go that's just boring but linear and kind of visually interesting and structural to me. It's clean, so there's no information that you don't want to see.
Let's say you're shooting people at the base of a hill and you want to put a castle on that hill. Well, you could build one, right? You get a prop and put a lot of money into it. Or you could hire a very good matte painter, a man who could take a piece of glass and then paint at the top of the glass that castle, and then you would actually put the frame of glass in front of the camera and shoot your live action. Rocco Giaffri, who did the matte paintings for Robocop, had a different technique. He didn't like to use glass, and he used masonite, masonry boards, and he would paint right on those, mainly because he was always dropping the glass and breaking the glass mats.
So a matte shot, in the traditional sense, the oldest way to do it, is a controlled double exposure where you shoot the live action, you're blacking out part of the frame, and black represents a lack of exposure. You go back in the darkroom, rewind that film, and reload that on a pedestal-mounted locked-off camera that's pointing at an artwork easel. And that artwork easel contains your matte painting, which is black now in the complementary portion of the frame, and it fits together like two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And it takes a certain number of tests, usually about 4 to 6 camera tests before you get your painting to blend properly with the live action. In a situation with an architectural matte painting, you usually try and find areas that you'll be able to hide your blend in, and you go along with the architectural lines as best as possible. I'd rather cut into the set and paint a portion of that back in, because more often people are looking for a matte line on the outside perimeters of the set piece, not within the set itself. They were going to be shooting in Dallas, Texas, and they wanted it to look like Detroit in the near future. Bill Sandell, the production designer, and John Davison and Paul Verhoeven had singled out the City Hall in Dallas, and they wanted that to be the base of an 80-story skyscraper for their OCP building. And so together we came up with an idea of the thing looking kind of like a big arrow that was stabbed into the ground. There's a wide shot of Delta City when Robocop's car is driving away from camera, and we actually shot across the bridge, the crossing an area there, and we matted into the existing cityscape, the OCP building, and other futuristic structures. John Davison specifically singled out his favorite shots in Forbidden Planet. He wanted the thing, especially the down angles, to just plunge infinitely, and just have this incredible depth. I believe there are only 2 matte paintings in Robocop that aren't done completely in camera on the original negative, and those are the elevator shots, because we needed to reduce the interior of the Plaza Americas to make it smaller and fit within that gigantic 80-story interior look. So those were optical reductions.
Optical reduction is when you take something of previously shot footage and actually reduce it in size to usually put it into something like a matte painting.
I'm responsible for the fall at the end of the film where Dick Jones is falling toward the street. Dick Jones is an animation puppet, a 2-foot-tall human animation stop-motion puppet in that shot. With a human being, you don't want to have him standing at attention with his arms at his sides. You want something that's going to be more in keeping with what he's actually going to be doing in the scene. And in the case of Ronnie Cox falling, he was falling spread eagle and kicking on the way down, so I had his arms out to the side and a slight crouch on him is how the sculpture was done over the top of the armature with plasticine clay. And that finished clay sculpture, you'll make a plaster mold. The clay is thrown away and the armature is taken back down to bare bones metal again. That empty armature is placed inside this mold that's been cleaned out and scrubbed, and those two halves are again put back together. The foam will be injected into the mold when the two halves are joined together with the armature inside of that, and that in turn is baked like a cake in an oven at 350 degrees for a number of hours until the moisture is evacuated from the foam rubber mixture, and the thing is allowed to cool down. You pull the two mold halves apart, you end up with a rubber puppet, a very nice soft foam rubber puppet that's a likeness from the clay sculpture that you did, and then it's up to you to clean that up, paint the thing, put in some eyeballs, and dress it up in the three-piece suit. This is just a typical example of an old-fashioned stop-motion puppet. It's either hinge joints in some places or ball and socket joints. I'm just going to crank this open so you can get a look at typically what a ball joint looks like here for stop motion.
Please put down your weapon. You have 20 seconds to comply.
Since Robocop was effectively a man in a suit, Ed 209 could not be in any way a man in a suit. So that's one of the reasons we chose to offset the hips or do things that would be clearly impossible for a person to fit in that. That's why his hips are so far apart. It's one of the reasons that there's rails. The joints don't have a standard, knee joint. They've actually got a linear rail kind of a system that's, again, one step further away from a person in a suit.
I felt that they knew so much more about it, and they came with the proposals. Then when they came with proposals, I could easily say, okay, but then do this, If we do it this way, then let's make this strange thing they had built, which is a gray area. Let's make that the eyes, the whole eyes. These are the eyes. There's hundreds of eyes. Basically, whatever it is, they can see through that, not by a little camera on the top of his head,
For the inspiration for Ed 209, we drew upon a number of different areas, tried to draw something in the natural world. So killer whales were something that had a pretty menacing kind of a countenance. Everything's kind of an excuse, there's a big air intake and it looks a lot like a mouth. And there's this big dome that you can't really see where the eyes are. The idea there was that this would be maybe like an anti-laser surface. This is kind of the maquette stage, and it really is pretty instrumental. The last round of design until you blow this thing up to full scale. This is basically, it's blue foam, it's house insulation foam. You take that, it's cheap and stuff. And you can mix with my favorite toothpicks and soda straws. You kind of build a little version of the robot that you can talk about. The leg, upper leg would be here. It could pivot, and then also, in order to take a step, the guy could actually shoot his leg forward, and then kind of, as he's walking forward, do this. So that was pretty critical, even the leg up and down. And then on the back here, a little bit of a plate, the screw access. And we figured since we're going to have a screw that's in there turning, we might as well put a detail on there. So I modeled the end of the screw to look like one of the axles you see on a railroad car. So as the guy's actually moving, you see these little things spinning.
The full-scale Ed 209 was a design that Craig had come up with, working with Paul Verhoeven and myself, and trying to get something that Paul was happy with as a character, a nemesis for Robocop.
The crew that we were building at this time, Pete Ronzani, Neil Breitbart, and Paula Lucchesi, my girlfriend at the time, we pretty much built that thing together. And it was hell, but it was one of those experiences you come through, and at the end of the day, it's something we always remember. Later on, we became married, and so I guess it didn't really split us apart. All the forms were built up out of wood. We used a lot of plywood, masonite, and just fur, and actually kind of built up patterns and stuff bit by bit. We used a lot of plastic forming techniques and fiberglass techniques. And seeing how it was basically the middle of summer in San Rafael, we were pretty much in hell, up to our ears in fiberglass, and wearing these suits, because you have to wear these protective suits and respirators and everything else while it's just blistering hot. It's a pretty tough portion there. One of the keys with movie props is they've got to be pretty flexible. You have to be able to put this thing together and take it apart in relatively short order. And actually, that's one of the things I'm pretty proud about, was the model was held together with bungee cords, snaps, and different techniques. So basically, two people could take the thing apart. We were pretty much left alone. In fact, for the full-scale prop, I don't think Paul saw it at all until it was delivered, in Dallas. That was pretty cool. I felt pretty trusted. Phil Tippett would check in on us on a periodic basis, come over and see what we're doing, and just kind of roll his eyes at the mess we were making and stuff. Our hearts were in it so much that compensation even wasn't necessarily important. Just contributing to this whole kind of process was really the motivation. The full-scale prop was essentially just that, a prop. It was capable of being posed. The head could be swiveled, from side to side. The arms were able to be pivoted. We could rotate them down or rotate them up, but it was really the kind of thing that had limited, very, very limited motion. Because of the size of the big guy, his head was so big that even though we made this pretty reinforced fiberglass mold, it still sagged a little bit. So when you see the big one compared to the miniature version is built exactly off the pattern for the big one. But when we molded the big one, it squished just a little bit. So the big guy's head's just a little bit fatter than the miniature version. And actually, it's one of those things that always bugged me when I saw it in the film because I recognized they were a little different. But what are you going to do?
Phil Tippett is the man on Robocop who actually animated the stop-motion puppets for Ed 209.
This is the stop-motion miniature of the Ed 209 puppet that has an articulated stop-motion skeleton or armature in it, and this is actually part of it's actually visible here. And you can see this lead screw mechanism that was part of the design that Craig Hayes had come up with.
Then they've made a number of miniature puppets that were articulated and had little skeletons inside of them of metal so you could pose them, and then this was done through stop motion animation.
Every little aspect of this particular character has got an armatured jointed part that allows, and shooting one frame of film can, depending upon the complexity of the shot, take anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour and a half, adjusting everything properly for one frame of film.
You get your camera, you take one frame, stop the camera, you go onto the little stage, move the arm infinitesimal inch, go back behind the camera, shoot another frame, one frame at a time.
Most of the work for Ed 209 was stop-motion animation, with the exception of the staircase scene, and in particular when he falls down the staircase. The staircase that Ed 209 fell down was a 4-foot square miniature, built of plywood and brass and, the usual kind of model building materials, reinforced so that when the guy fell down the stairs, it didn't shake the set too much. Phil did all of the kind of masterminding of exactly how we were going to do that, what angle the set would be at to get the best roll and everything. And then we rigged up the puppet with the pin in his foot. And when we said go, camera was rolling Cisco, I had to fly it out to Dallas. And I remember as Phil and I were going out there, I had this big giant blown off robot arm wrapped in some paper and stuff, and they asked me what it was at the airport. And I didn't want to say it was a big giant blown off robot arm, so I said it was a planter. And they said, okay, just put it in there. It's hard to imagine these days, getting a giant blown off arm, through any kind of airport security. But back then it was like whatever.
I thought for sure that I'd be able to continue doing matte paintings with a paintbrush and camera trickery for the rest of my life.
Since Robocop, yeah, the industry, visual effects in particular, have changed so radically.
In the digital world, you're in an arena where you have your frame and you can do anything you want with it. You don't have to go have a separate camera shoot something else. You can create it in the digital world right there, and you can put it into the frame right there.
With the advent of computer graphics and Photoshop matte paintings, the cut and paste methods, and just using photo collage, matte painters could, for the most part, start coming out of the woodwork. People that couldn't create a realistic painting with their hands and with a paintbrush were suddenly, there's just like tons of matte painting artists now.
There's a completely different kind of realm of equipment that's necessary, and the accessibility, of course.
These days, visual effects are done in a variety of ways. You can create something completely from scratch in the computer, build 3D models and light them and so forth, and do that all entirely in the machine.
You can go to a store and you could buy the software, the hardware, most of the stuff that you would need to actually do visual effects.
I don't know if there was if there really is a need for doing stop motion anymore.
Stop motion animation is still around, but certainly in a far diminished capacity.
In regards to doing visual effects work, I think it's it's been replaced by computer graphics pretty much.
I found that by the late 1990s, by 1997, that early in that year, that for the most part, any phone call that I got requesting a matte painting shot, they wanted to know for sure that I was doing it with computer graphics.
It's a completely different world.
That's the way of Hollywood and the film industry. The technology only reflects, what's current, and it's constantly being replaced.
You can watch the film nowadays, and the shots do hold up.
One of the biggest compliments for me on the whole project was when my friends who really didn't understand what we did would come over, walk up to this thing and kick it, and it was hollow. They'd be shocked, they thought it was a 4-ton giant robot that we had built.
They're actually artists who happen to be working with very sophisticated special effects.
We get the best of both worlds. The fastest reflexes modern technology has to offer, onboard computer-assisted memory, and a lifetime of on-the-street law enforcement programming. It is my great pleasure to present to you Robocop.
Come on, come on, come on, come on. That's for you.
Robocop. The future of law enforcement. Part human, part machine. A law enforcement Lazarus risen from the dead and programmed to patrol an urban combat zone.
Come quietly or there will be trouble.
Peter Weller stars in the title role as Robocop. The director is Paul Verhoeven.
Well, it's an action picture, I suppose, first of all. And it is, it has some other level, telling you something about the possibility of the human soul to survive everything. So it's on two levels. I think it's an action picture, and it's a picture about the human soul.
This guy is really good.
He's not a guy, he's a machine.
What are they gonna do, replace us?
And I play John Murphy, a.k.a. Robocop, a policeman who's taken from his beat in Detroit and used as an experiment, much against his own will. He turns into a robot, a cyborg.
Nancy Allen plays Ann Lewis.
You may not like what you're going to see.
Tough and athletic, yet surprisingly tender. She becomes the cyborg's one true friend.
And she is like the beauty in the Beauty and the Beast. She recognizes Robocop, you know, for what he really is, and finds out the secret, the mystery to Robocop.
I was very nervous about how am I going to relate to this creature, you know. And Peter's such a wonderful actor. I mean, there was just, you know, sometimes I'd look at him and is there anyone there? So I think because of how good he is at his job, it made it really easy for me.
One of my earliest recollections of robots is sitting in front of a television set when I was 4 years old watching a local Philadelphia TV show called Mr. Rivets, and it was a man in a cardboard box painted silver. Now, hopefully we've done a little better than that.
Let the woman go. You are under arrest.
You better back up, pal!
The future of law enforcement. Robocop.
Hello, hi, hey, come on guys. There's nothing there, just give me a little bit more there.
For director Paul Verhoeven, Robocop marks not only his first American feature, but also his initial plunge into the special demands of science fiction.
For the slates. Ready? Action! Yeah, it jumped at actually the same moment, but we can intercut it, yeah?
I think that he wanted to make the movie, and he did make the movie for American sensibilities, not for European sensibilities. Still, the obliqueness of it and some of the humor and the wit and the social milieu that the jackpot of little goodies that he throws in is from Europe. So it's tremendously unique.
Drop the gun. You are under arrest. Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
Sometimes it's really difficult to get these things on paper, yeah? You really have to know the writer and to talk with him and find out what is the common opinion behind what is written in the lines.
It distinguished itself from other robot movies because it's about a guy who becomes a machine. It's a very violent movie. It's sort of a comedy, I think. I mean, if you like a good robot picture, this might be it.
From the corridors of corporate corruption to the crime-infested streets, Robocop takes dead aim at the urban underworld and tracks down his own killers. This warehouse is the setting for one of the most complex and challenging sequences in the film.
Action will be everybody shooting, yeah?
In this climactic scene, Robocop confronts his own executioners. The firepower, stunts, and special effects that result are truly awesome. Here, director Verhoeven consults with special effects man Dale Martin.
On action, our man's going to come in on action. You're going to see the whole wall get machine gunned and back with bullet hits. The glass will pop, the lights and all that. As he moves forward, we'll see some hits of cement, the ground, and then we'll throw some sparks off his body.
Explosive charges called squibs are placed by the special effects crew. These squibs, when detonated, simulate bullet hits. Special protective vests are used when placing squibs on actors. Here, special effects employ a jerk vest, a special harness worn by the actor with a hook protruding in the back. A wire is attached, and when the squibs explode, the wire is jerked, and the actor will be pulled backwards, giving the effect of being blown away. In complex scenes like this, the director choreographs each element separately, so the actors, camera, special effects, and stunts all work together as a cohesive whole.
Well, you have this sequence here, which is a big shootout. The robot comes in the building, kills all the baddies in the building, so that's not super dangerous. It's just it requires a number of stunt people, a lot of bullet hits, a lot of blood bags and things like that.
I'll wait, and then it will be action! Bam, 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 go!
I think you should run to see this movie. And not only because I'm in it, but because, well, we'll talk about it later. Go see it.
I'm Phil Tippett. I was the visual effects supervisor for the Ed 209 scenes on Robocop. Primarily responsible for the stop motion animation on the Ed 209, the police droid sequences. Yeah, for the stop motion characters, the deal is really no different than the currently computer graphic characters today. It's finding what's in the script that's compelling or interesting, what the background of the character is, and it really depends on what it is. I know for Ed 209, we taped and filmed a lot of, actually at that time I think it was the 16mm film, robots. We shot a lot of robotic elements and went to like mills and lathes and looked at the attack and decay of movement and how things jiggled, and you begin to build up these files, and then you work very closely with the director in laying out the choreography in storyboard form, and that pretty much determines the approach that you use for actually shooting on the set and making sure that the plan that you have started out with is the plan you execute on the day, or that it doesn't vary more than 10 or 15%, because particularly for the stop motion photography and the budgets that we were working with then, really didn't allow for any really elaborate camera moves where you have to track the thing in. They were pretty much all locked off shots, and so all the choreography of the surrounding action can't be too wild and handheld and then cut to this boring locked off shot. Paul, one of the things that characterizes his picture making style is his camera choreography, and then it comes to these shots where, what, you want me to lock off the camera for all the shots? Yeah. I go, okay. Because of the budgetary constraints that we had, he was very reasonable at collaborating and allowing the structure of the scenes to be determined by the limitations of the technology. And at the time, stop motion animation was kind of a tricky thing. There were certain kinds of things you did with it and certain kinds of things you didn't do with it. And the plan, as we had developed it, was to structure the scenes around a large-scale prop that just stood there for the dialogue scenes and a stop-motion model for the action and ambulatory scenes. And just making sure that there was kind of an internal logic, because the thing was a robot, it could shut itself down, it would walk into a room, pa-dunk, jink, dunk, power itself down, and then we'd wheel in the big prop. Most of the time we used the full-scale prop that Craig Hayes built and shoot the dialogue scenes. And Paul did the rehearsal, so Paul would, come in and be Ed 209 and do his, and frighten all the actors, and that was like the run-through, and we'd film that run-through. And then, Paul would leave, and we'd film a burst of the Ed 209, that would be our lighting reference, and we'd pull that out. And the actors had all their eye lines, and, and Paul, directed them. You look here, and then you look there, and he is very careful about his, his choreography and his layouts. And that was pretty much the structure of how we dealt with all that stuff, and allowed, created a very simple but convincing illusion. That's all very important. Then, then primarily what you're dealing with is the presence of the thing inside the locked off frame, and it doesn't become about, all the camera choreography. It becomes about the action of the thing. There really wasn't a lot of money to work with, so we couldn't get into really any fancy blue screen photography, and at that time it was certainly quite pre-digital technology. So the only way at that time of creating these artificial characters was either putting a guy in a suit or building a big prop or doing a stop motion animation puppet. So I was a big proponent of unearthing a lot of the Ray Harryhausen techniques. Having worked for a number of years at Lucasfilm, most of the work and the compositing that was done there was via blue screen, and it's a very kind of a strange and personal way of working, where you have to imagine what you're shooting against a nondescript blue screen. But with rear screen photography, which is what we used on Robocop, it was a development of the de-animation process that Ray Harryhausen used from Sinbad on, which you shoot a photographic background plate, project it onto a translucent screen, build a stage, put your puppet in front of that, stop motion puppet in front of that, light that puppet so that it matches the background, and have any foreground objects that you need to, and shoot that. Now there's a whole litany of different tricks that you can apply to create masks that break up the actual photographic background that you've shot, that allows you to place the character within the photographic background. And that means shooting through panes of glass that you've painted out black, or doing paintings on glass that you've lit to match. And all of the Robocop photography was done with VistaVision background plates, a large 8x format that we were very careful in designing, as all reproduction, photographic reproduction, gains contrast and grain and color distortion. So we shot on the widest format, double the size of the 4x taking cameras, that allowed us the smallest amount of grain, and we worked at creating very special low contrast masks for the backgrounds as well, because we knew that the backgrounds were going to gain. So I was very lucky to have, working for me at that time, Harry Walton, who was very adept at developing these contrast masking plates.
There's a scene in the night to dance a little bit in a kind of a punky way, So I was dancing with them just to get them in the mood, and then at the end of the shot, basically, Joost, for fun, basically, when he was after shooting them dancing, he makes just a shift with the camera to the side, but I'm doing like this. To my big amazement, when I saw the editing, I saw myself there. I said, "What are you doing with this?" He said, "Well, it works very well. You needed something a little bit extra there. That was you."